Economics education. Yeah, I know. Sounds a little dry, right? But trust me, this deep dive is anything but. We're talking about using games to tackle real-world problems, like high-stakes stuff.
It really changes how you think about economics.
Right, and we're not just talking theory here. We're talking about solutions, tools.
Like that term, economist plumbers.
Okay, I'll bite. What's an economist plumber?
It's a term coined by Esther Duflo, a Nobel laureate.
Yeah.
Basically, it describes economists who, well, they get their hands dirty.
Sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Traditional economists, they often work with these pristine models. But the real world, it's messy, full of surprises.
Kind of like pipes bursting and unexpected leaks and...
Exactly. And just like a plumber who has to deal with those real-world plumbing problems, an economist plumber has to grapple with the unpredictable nature of human behavior, political realities, and all the messy details that traditional models often miss.
So it's less about theoretical equations and more about, like, fixing the pipes of the global economy.
You got it. It's about understanding the system from the ground up, dealing with the leaks and clogs, and figuring out how to keep things flowing smoothly.
So how do games fit into all of this?
Well, games, especially those designed for teaching, can be fantastic tools for illustrating economic principles in action.
They let you experiment, see the consequences of your choices.
Right. And as technology has advanced, these games have become incredibly sophisticated. But even the simpler ones, focusing on core concepts like supply and demand, have a lot to offer.
Like those simulations where you're running your own virtual business.
Exactly. You learn by doing, by making decisions and seeing how they play out.
But there's always that balance, right? Between making a game engaging and keeping it realistic.
Absolutely. If it's too simple, it loses its educational value. Too complex, and it becomes inaccessible. It's a tightrope walk.
And have those early games, like the ones from the 60s and 70s, have they managed to find that sweet spot?
Some did a better job than others. But even back then, there was a real push to make economics engaging, to move away from dry textbooks and lectures.
And those early games were really just the beginning, right?
Oh yeah. As technology evolved, so did the possibilities for serious games. We started to see more complex simulations, games that could model entire economies.
It's like going from lemonade stand tycoon to, like, managing the entire global market.
In a way, yes. And that's where things start to get really interesting with this idea of the economist plumber.
Because the more complex those games get, the closer they resemble the messy realities that economist plumbers have to deal with.
You're getting it. But before we dive deeper into that, let's talk about a few specific examples of how these games have evolved.
Okay, so from virtual lemonade stands to tackling global economic crises. Sounds like we're about to level up this deep dive.
You could say that. And one game in particular highlights this shift towards more complex real-world scenarios. SimCity. You ever played it?
Oh yeah, SimCity. Hours of my life, gone. Building those virtual cities, trying to keep everyone happy and the budget balanced. It was a trip.
And you probably didn't even realize how much economics you were learning along the way. Budgeting, infrastructure, pollution, inequality. These are all real-world challenges that SimCity, even as an entertainment game, makes you think about.
It's true. You couldn't just bulldoze your way through problems. Well, you could, but it usually ended in disaster.
Right.
Which taught you something too, I guess.
Exactly. And those are the kind of lessons that traditional economics courses often struggle to convey. The interconnectedness of systems, the trade-offs, the law of unintended consequences.
Because in SimCity, just like in the real world, every decision has a ripple effect, right?
Precisely. And that brings us back to this idea of the economist plumber. It's not just about understanding economic theory in isolation.
It's about knowing how to apply it in a dynamic, ever-changing system.
Exactly. And that's where those games, even ones not explicitly designed for education, can be so powerful.
So we've gone from textbook economics to SimCity. What's the next level? I mean, can we design even better games specifically to train these economist plumbers?
That's a great question, and one that researchers like Karaarslan are exploring right now. He suggests combining the rigor of serious games with the engaging, unpredictable elements of commercial games. Imagine a game that throws unexpected events your way.
Like a natural disaster, or maybe a sudden stock market crash.
Exactly. And you, as the player, you have to think on your feet, adapt your strategies, and deal with the fallout, all while trying to keep the economy afloat.
It'd be like a flight simulator for navigating the complexities of the global economy.
A very apt comparison. And as technology continues to evolve, particularly with VR and AR, we can make these experiences even more immersive. Imagine walking the virtual streets of your simulated city, talking to citizens, seeing the direct impact of your policies.
It sounds like the possibilities for these games are pretty much endless. And who knows, maybe the games we imagine today could inspire the real-world solutions of tomorrow.
That's the hope, isn't it? To use these games not just to educate, but to empower, to equip people with the tools they need to tackle the economic challenges of the 21st century.
And speaking of challenges, in a world that feels increasingly complex and interconnected, if you could design the ultimate economics game, what would it look like?
Oh, that's a tough one. But I think any game that truly wants to prepare us for the future needs to do a few things.
Like what? Give us a sneak peek.
Well, for starters, it has to move beyond traditional economic models. We need games that embrace complexity, that force us to grapple with uncertainty and unexpected events.
So less about predicting the future, more about learning to adapt to it.
Exactly. And it also needs to highlight the human element, because economics isn't just about numbers and graphs. It's about people, their choices, their values.
It sounds like you're describing a game that's as much about ethics and empathy as it is about economic theory.
Precisely. Because the decisions we make, whether in a game or in the real world, they have real consequences. And we need to be prepared to make those decisions thoughtfully, compassionately, and with our eyes wide open to the complexities of the world around us.
And maybe, just maybe, if we can design games that do all of that, well, we might just create a generation of economist plumbers ready to tackle whatever challenges come their way.
You're absolutely right. It's more than just virtual businesses. The real world, it's way more complex than any game.
Which is where I'm guessing this whole economist plumber thing comes in.
Exactly. See, traditional economic models, they often assume everything works smoothly. People make rational decisions. But in the real world, it's not so neat.
It's like, yeah, the pipes burst, things get messy.
Precisely. Just like a plumber has to deal with those real-world plumbing problems, an economist plumber has to deal with those unexpected bursts in the system.
So less about theoretical models, more about fixing the actual pipes of the economy.
You got it. And that's a really important point that Karaarslan makes in his paper. He talks about this shift from economists as just observers to, as he calls them, mechanism designers.
So not just studying the system, they're actually trying to, fix it.
Exactly. And that requires a different way of thinking. You have to understand those nuances, the quirks, even corruption.
Things that those pristine models just don't account for.
Right. And that brings us back to games. Because even games that aren't specifically designed to be educational can offer some really insightful lessons.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Well, you were saying earlier you spent a lot of time playing SimCity, right?
Oh, yeah. Hours and hours.
Building those cities?
Yeah.
Trying to keep all your little Sims happy?
And solvent. Don't forget about keeping the city budget in check. That was always a challenge.
Right. But in doing that, you were engaging with core economic principles.
Yeah.
Maybe without even realizing it.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Budgeting, infrastructure, pollution, inequality. These are all real-world economic problems that a game like SimCity forces you to confront.
It's true. To make your city thrive, you couldn't just, bulldoze over those issues.
Exactly. You had to make tough choices. Prioritize. Deal with the consequences. And those are the skills an economist plumber needs.
It's not just theory. It's about applying those ideas in a really complex system.
Exactly. And SimCity highlights something else that's crucial for those economist plumbers. It shows how interconnected everything is. Make one decision, and it sets off this chain reaction.
Oh, tell me about it. One minute you're flush with cash, the next you're dealing with a budget shortfall because you overspent on, parks.
Exactly. And that's what those traditional economics courses often miss. They don't quite capture those ripple effects, those unintended consequences. But in SimCity, well, you learn pretty quickly that every decision, even a seemingly small one, has a consequence.
It makes you wonder if we could design games that are even more effective for, training those economist plumbers.
That's a question that researchers like Karaarslan are really digging into right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. He suggests taking those serious games, the ones designed for learning, and kind of
Spice them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like adding in some of those unpredictable elements you get in those, commercial games.
So it's less textbook, more, edge of your seat gameplay.
Exactly. Think about it. What if those games could, throw a curveball at you?
Like a natural disaster. Or maybe, like you said, a stock market crash.
Exactly. And you, as the player, you'd have to, think fast.
Make tough decisions with limited information, kind of like the real world, actually.
Right. And wouldn't that be valuable? A way to, like, test out different approaches, see what works, what completely
That'd be
backfires.
like a flight simulator, but for, navigating the global economy.
I like that. And Karaarslan, he points out that these types of games, they can be way more impactful than, just reading a textbook or listening to a lecture.
Hmm.
Because it's not just theory, right? You're thrown right into the action.
You have to think on your feet, make tough calls, deal with the
Right.
consequences.
Yeah, exactly. And as technology keeps evolving, I mean, imagine those games, but with VR or AR.
Oh, whoa. Next level.
Right. You'd be walking through your virtual city, talking to people, seeing how your policies are playing out in real time.
That's wild. The possibilities for these games, they really do feel endless, huh?
They really do. And, it makes you think, maybe, just maybe, the games we're imagining today, they could lead to those real-world solutions we desperately need tomorrow.
Because ultimately, this isn't just about economics, is it? It's about, problem assessing, critical thinking.
Absolutely. And maybe even more importantly, it's about understanding that our choices, they have consequences.
And that even small decisions can have a ripple effect, just like in those games we've been talking about.
Exactly. And if we can design games that really drive that point home, well, maybe we can create a generation that's ready to tackle those real-world challenges head-on.
A generation of economist plumbers armed with algorithms and monkey wrenches, ready to fix those leaky pipes and build a better future. It's been a fascinating deep dive, and I hope you'll join us next time as we explore another intriguing corner of the world around us.